today's tutorial, we will break down the process of how to draw a tongue. Hey, I am artist Muthuswamy. Light sketch with 2H pencil. Now, tongues are one of these really strange features that need some context, and this is because they're quite abstract in their form. Tongues are what you would call a contextualizing feature. And what I mean by this is that it needs surrounding features in order for it to make sense. Tongues would not make sense in isolation. So in order to draw an accurate tongue, what we're going to do is we're going to draw a mouth opening with the tongue sticking out. And this is going to give us a good sense of how the tongue functions and is placed within the context of the mouth. 1. Light sketch. So we can begin this drawing process with a light pencil sketch. And what we're going to do now is we're going to actually start working on a shaping of the mouth. So when a mouth opens, what happens is the top row of teeth are what are most visible. And what happens is those top row of teeth are kind of resting on the tongue. The tongue itself tends to overlap at the bottom row of teeth, so the bottom row, or the bottom lip as well, won't be visible. What will be visible is obviously the tongue itself, and then this widening of the upper lips with the exposed top row of teeth. Light shading with 3B pencil. So with our pencils, what we want to do is we want to work on a light sketch, and this is where we start to just vaguely form the tongue and the shape of the mouth. Again, because the upper lip is kind of stretching and starts to become slightly thin, we want to remember that the top lip is not large. It is quite a narrow shape. And as it widens, it will obviously lift up slightly, exposing the entire top row of teeth. When it comes to the top row of teeth, the teeth that tend to be most visible are the central incisors, as well as the lateral incisors and the first premolars. As soon as we start getting to the back row of teeth, they tend to fall behind the cheeks and become less visible. So we also want to consider how obviously the upper lip not only stretches wide to expose the top row of teeth, but which teeth are exposed. We're also getting a sense of the entire tooth, so that means that we've seen the gum and the entire tooth of these main front row teeth for the entire upper row. So what we really want to do is we just want to make sure that we work out a general pencil sketch. Darken area, teeth, and lips. As the tongue comes out of the mouth, we also want to understand that the tongue slightly widens, and this is because it's kind of flattening against the bottom of the mouth. And this gives it a bit more of an arching and widening structure. Now, obviously, the tongue is quite a malleable structure, and this means it can morph into and change shape. So as it rests in the mouth, it tends to be quite thick and narrow, but it also has the ability to flatten out. What we want to do now is once we have this general schedule, we're going to start working with a 3B pencil. And this is where we start to work in some shading into this drawing of the mouth and the tongue. A good suggestion is to start working around the teeth, and this is where we can start darkening the gaps that are kind of demonstrate the inside of the mouth. So we can actually darken those areas to create more depth. And this is because as we darken the inside of the mouth, it's going to create more depth, bringing the teeth slightly more forward, as well as the tongue, creating more three-dimensionality within the drawing itself. Now, when it comes to the tongue, the way in which we kind of define the shape of the tongue is with this very subtle shading. A good suggestion is to look at a few images of a tongue sticking out of a mouth. And what happens is the tongue has these subtle little curves and indentations and grooves. But because it is this muscular type of structure, it doesn't have any sharp edges. The way in which its curves are defined is by the way the light source interacts with the surface of the tongue. And this is where it starts to expose these very subtle details in the tongue, such as the dorsum of the tongue, as well as the median sulcus of the tongue, and so on and so on. And these little details, these little indentations, these bumps, these grooves, that center line that runs through the tongue, these are all very soft details. And the way in which we establish these details is not with a distinct line work, but with really soft shading. Now, obviously, the tongue is basically broken up into two equal parts, and with the center having this indentation that runs down the middle of the tongue. The tongue tends to have this curvature. The tongue also is quite thick, which means that we want to capture this quality. But the way in which we capture this quality, again, isn't with any sort of distinct line work, but it is about kind of understanding how the light interacts with the tongue itself to create these shadow wings that define the outlining of the thickness of the tongue. Now, something to bear in mind, the tongue is also generally moist. Use charcoal pencil for highlights. So what happens is light reflects off of that moist surface along the entire surface of the tongue. And this means that there's a lot of highlights within the tongue itself. So this is the way in which we kind of use these details or these features of highlights as well as shadow formation to strategically define the shape of the tongue, as well as the grooves, indentations, and all these little details like the taste buds and so on. Now, we really want to make sure that we're working a lot of shading along the outer rim of the tongue. And this is where most of our shading work will be present in the drawing of the tongue. Now, the reason why we do this is obviously because the tongue is sticking out, and it's kind of flattened from this pose. It is quite exposed to light, which means there's going to be a lot of negative space or highlights present in the tongue. So when we shade in the tongue, we're not necessarily shading in the entire structure. What we're actually going to do is we're going to use a lot of negative space, and we're going to use a lot of subtle shading to define the structure more along the edge of the tongue. So with our pencils, what we want to do is we want to actually shade along the outline of the tongue. As we come to the tip of the tongue, we're going to start working some shading through to the center of the tongue. We can also work some shading directly up through or along the center, moving into the mouth, as well as moving along the sides of the tongue. I too think of it also as working negative space along the edge of the tongue. So the idea is that we're going to work shading along the actual outline of the tongue. But then we're going to leave some negative space and then work shading again along the inner side of the tongue, or as in we're going to work in some shading that runs parallel with the outside of the tongue, leaving that negative strip, that negative space strip along the outsides of the tongue to kind of bring more three-dimensionality, give more depth to the structure, and kind of suggest more curvature in the structure as well. Then, from the center points running from the tip of the tongue all the way through to the teeth or inside the mouth, we can start to add in some more shading. Again, the intention here is not to color in the entire tongue, but to rather utilize our shading in a way that kind of emphasizes the curvature or the subtle curves within the tongue itself. We can obviously add more detail and shading to the surrounding features, and this is obviously going to give the tongue drawing overall a more detailed quality, giving it a more realistic quality. Again, a tongue is not a structure that exists in isolation. Artist must learn this 5 tips to improve his talent. For more details, just click my next videos. Thanks for watching.